Okay,
Oh, lovely.
now there should be audio on the stream. Hopefully. Now there should be audio on the stream. Hopefully.
Oh, guys. Well, we're 7 minutes late already.
Well, say something else, Moss.
Something else,
Well,
Moss.
say something else, Moss.
Something else,
Well,
Moss.
say something else, Moss.
We ready on Audacity?
Something else, Moss.
We ready on Audacity? Are we ready for Audacity?
I'm ready on Audacity. I don't know
Norbert?
about the Norberts.
Audacity, Norbert.
I'm on it. I mean, I'm on
Okay.
it. I'm on getting it working.
Aha. Well, let me know
But
when
I
you're
do.
ready.
But this time, at least, I do have it installed.
Yes. And you got it on mono, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, it's picking up the correct. I have had it on mono for months.
That's all right. I just had to say something stupid.
Something stupid.
Watch it or I'll start singing the song.
This is the song that never ends.
No, something stupid. Nancy Sinatra. You remember that one. You're old enough for that, Joe.
I don't remember that one. What country was I in when it came out?
It was a duet with Frank Sinatra. So she was singing to her daddy that she loved him. And then I go and spoil it all by saying something stupid like I love you. Not my best voice, so I'll stop. Audacity.
It's working. I'm
3, 2,
ready.
1, record.
Yep.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Discord, public, paste.
Posting the stream.
Telegram.
My index finger is right on the R key.
Norbert, you may have noticed that all those European things that nobody knows anything about, that we didn't have anything in the show notes about, I just sort of put and then we got these other licenses, blah, 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 blah.
Yep. That's what I was
Okay.
thinking.
Okay. It's nice that we're thinking alike, Norbert.
Yeah. Okay. I filled out the MIT, Apache, and the Mozilla licenses, but
Yes.
the Quebec licenses and the Cecil, the licenses I haven't even heard about.
Yeah.
Those.
Well, I've got it glossed over in the show notes. Like Joe said, if we want to talk about those, we can do that next show.
Honestly, there's
Yep.
there's just so much that we could definitely turn this into a multi-show type of thing.
We already went from 9 pages to 16 pages.
All right. I think we are posted just about everywhere, including Facebook.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, record.
What?
3. Wait.
Oh.
3, 2, 1, record.
I hear heavy breathing.
Well, that's tough. Sync time. 3, 2, 1, 0. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
Close enough for government work. I guess I need to get my show notes here. Yay. We ready? Yes, no, maybe?
I'm as ready as
Maybe.
I'm going to be.
Okay. Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 390. This is episode 390.5, recorded on Sunday, the 26th of June, 2022. From the left side of the tree, I'm Moss.
Back home in Texas, I'm Joe.
From the magical medieval kingdom of data protection and privacy laws, I'm Norbert.
First up in the news, GNOME wins Microsoft money, Firefox translates offline, Rocky overtakes the Red Hat pack, apps on KDE look more clear, Debian gets the Gecko treatment, Zoom gets Wayland screen sharing, Photoshop is kind of but not really coming to Linux, and NVIDIA contributes. In security and privacy, Hertzbleed is coming for your CPU, and the EU is going after deep fakes. Then in our wanderings, Moss goes custom, Norbert emerges, and Joe is Florida man. In our innards section, we discuss the various licenses in the world of open source software, and finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. And now the news. Norbert?
GNOME? No, sorry. The GNOME project wins Microsoft FOSS Fund. This is from Twitter, tweeted by Emma Irvin, and from Microsoft's GitHub. The Microsoft FOSS Fund provides a direct way for Microsoft, and Moss is editing the text, and his name tag just blocked out the text that I'm trying to read. The Microsoft FOSS Fund provides a direct way for Microsoft engineers to participate in the nomination and selection process to help communities and projects they are passionate about. The FOSS Fund provides $10,000 sponsorships to open source projects as selected by Microsoft employees. To help drive an open contribution culture across Microsoft, employees are eligible to select projects for the fund when they participate in projects that are not governed by Microsoft. And if we go to the GitHub page, we see that this is a monthly fund, and there's so each month a different project is listed. So for May 2022, it was GNOME. From April, in April it was systemd and Leaflet, and so such projects as curl and QEMU, and yeah, it's a pretty decent list. It's been going on since 2020 apparently, and it was I haven't heard about this before, but it was a pleasant surprise that GNOME, so a desktop environment, was nominated and won it, because I assume Microsoft employees, when it comes to open source projects and projects related to Linux, I assume that they mostly use headless software for servers and development. So this was a pleasant surprise.
Okay, well, I don't have anything
Anyone
to
else?
add to that.
Well, I could add that maybe if we consider how much Microsoft is worth, this monthly $10,000 might not be that much, and maybe, I mean, it's great that they even do this, but maybe they could give more money for these projects,
Well, for
because I'm
most of
not
your
sure.
open source projects, like $10,000 is pretty darn good.
Yes, but when you think about something that is the size of GNOME, maybe it has less of an impact.
It's
I mean,
still
when I
ten
look at
thousand dollars they didn't have yesterday.
yeah, that's fair. All right, Joe.
Okay, Mozilla made a Firefox plugin for offline translation. Mozilla has created a translation plugin for Firefox that works offline. Firefox translations will need to download some files the first time you convert text in a specific language. However, it will be able to use your system's resources to handle this translation, rather than sending the information to a data center for cloud processing. The plugin emerged as a result of Mozilla's work with the European Union funded Project Bergamot. The goal was to develop neural machine tools to help Mozilla create an offline translation option. The engine's language models and in-page translation algorithms would need to reside and be executed entirely in the user's computer. So none of the data would be sent to the cloud, making it entirely private, Mozilla said. One of the big limitations of the plugin as things stand is that it can only handle translations between English and 12 other languages. According to TechCrunch, for now, Firefox translation supports Spanish, Bulgarian, Czech, Estonian, German, Icelandic, Italian, Norwegian, Bokmal, and Nynorsk, Persian, Portuguese, and Russian. For the time being, though, the plugin can't hold a candle to the 133 languages that Google Translate supports. Apple and Google both have mobile apps that can handle offline translations as well.
I'm wondering if you, because in the Google Translate app you can download languages for offline translation. I wonder how this would compare to that, because when you translate online with Google, obviously it has access to a lot more resources, a lot bigger database. So because this is offline, maybe it shouldn't be compared to the abilities of Google's online translation. But it's great.
Well, I noticed
have
that
this.
when they tell you that you've got the plugin and you need to enable it, then your browser starts crawling and you pick your settings and you can't really do anything. So your best bet is to close it and reopen, and then everything works. So it's okay that it keeps working, but you will probably need to restart your browser.
That's cool.
Did anybody want Rocky Linux, or am I doing that?
That sounds like a moss to me.
Okay, Rocky Linux shoots ahead from Phoronix. Statistics published by Fedora for the Extra Packages for Enterprise Linux, EPEL, usage point to a recent surge in Rocky Linux usage, at least for those with EPEL enabled, and at least recently appears to surpass the usage for the likes of CentOS Stream. Okay. Alma Linux and even the RHEL usage with EPL enabled. Rocky Enterprise Software Foundation project manager Brian Clemens shared the recent EPEL statistics pointing to the recent uptick in Rocky Linux usage. Rocky Linux, as a reminder, is the RHEL downstream started after the announcement that CentOS Linux would cease and CentOS 8 go EOL in order to focus on Red Hat's new CentOS Stream development approach. Rocky Linux gained initial notoriety with Gregory Kurtzer as the original CentOS founder, having started it to pursue the original goals initially laid out by CentOS. It's been nearly 1 year to the day since the first Rocky Linux 8 GA release, and they are currently working on their Rocky Linux 9.0 release coming soon. Oracle Linux remains at the rear of the pack, according to EPEL statistics.
All the happenings around CentOS and CentOS Stream and the new forks that were created, it's, even though I'm not really impacted by any of this because I'm not really using Enterprise Linux, it's still interesting, and it was surprisingly covered a lot in news outlets that are not necessarily focused on enterprise. I'm not sure what the difference is between Rocky Linux and Alma Linux. I briefly tried Alma Linux lately, and I realized that it's not really so these aren't as good for a daily driver for home desktop personal usage as Fedora, because there seems to be a lot of packages that are not in the repos and neither in the EPEL repos. For example, I wanted to download the Papyrus icon set, and it wasn't even packaged in either of them. So I assume it comes down to who provides better support and who is able to follow RHEL releases more closely.
Not so sure about that. All of them seem to be byte by byte compatible with RHEL, so it's a matter of choice.
And also having more is better than having less options. All right.
So what about KDE, Norbert?
This week in KDE, non-blurry Xbayland apps. This is from the KDE developer Nate Graham's blog. Plasma 5.26 will resolve a major pain point for Wayland users with high DPI screens. You'll now be able to choose how you want your Xbayland apps to be scaled, either by the compositor, ensuring uniform scaling but blurriness. This is the status quo. I've actually experienced the same thing when I was running non-Wayland and non-GTK apps. For example, VSE was blurry on when using fractional scaling. And the new option is so scaling is handled by the apps themselves, allowing them to use their pre-existing X11 high DPI capabilities if they have them, but leaving apps without such capabilities at the wrong scale. So I assume what this means is the more apps have built-in scaling capabilities, the less this will become a problem. I didn't really think about this. So if you have a system-wide scaling by the compositor, that even though an app may have built-in X11 scaling, it doesn't matter because the compositor will just render the thing at 1x scale and then upscale it. In which case it becomes blurry or pixelated. So this is cool. I think this is something very similar to what Elementary OS does, where Elementary OS Leo said that it's not a real scaling; it just increases the font size, and all the elements sort of follow that. So the apps essentially themselves are the ones doing the scaling for on per app. It says, so if all the Xvillain apps you support high DPI scaling properly on X11, you can use this new setting to make them look nice and crisp at your chosen scale factor. So yeah, basically what I assumed. So apps that are Wayland native should all work perfectly when it comes to scaling, right? At least that's my experience. And this is only a problem with apps that are not able to run natively on Wayland. I mean, when I see Wayland related news, I always get excited because I will talk about this a bit more in my wanderings. But at this point, I'm all in on switching to Wayland as soon as possible.
Okay. Spiral Linux. It's Debian in the same way Gecko is OpenSUSE. From the register, the anonymous person who created Gecko has struck again, this time applying his skills to Debian. You get a live image to boot into. You get the most minimal non-free drivers such as Wi-Fi. You get ButterFS configured with both compression Fedora style and automatic snapshots OpenSUSE style, including for the kernel. You get improved font rendering. You get Flatpak support complete with the GNOME software app, even on non-GNOME installations. Along with extra drivers, the Debian non-free repositories are pre-configured, so more hardware will work out of the box, including VirtualBox guest support and HP printers and scanners, and they'll get updates in the future. Rather than a dedicated partition, it uses a swap file on the root drive, plus ZRAM compressed swap for low memory machines. TLP is installed and configured for better laptop battery life, too. But when it's all installed, you get the closest possible thing to pure Debian. I am vaguely interested in trying this out.
It does sound cool.
I am the one that always uses Gecko when someone says you should look at OpenSUSE.
And Gecko is really, really close to OpenSUSE.
But it sounds like Debian doesn't normally come with ButterFS or the automatic snapshots. I'm not sure how close you would be to pure Debian.
I know that when you are using the net installer for Debian, you can only have subvolumes even if during the installation you switch to a different TTY and do the partitioning manually. I have no idea about the live ISOs that have calamaris for Debian, whether they can set up the subvolumes and snapshotting. But whenever there's a new Debian-based distro, it's always interesting because there are a lot of Debian-based distros. But Gecko Linux is a pretty nice distro. So based on that, This this just intends to be basically a better Debian, a more polished Debian, then I approve.
Well, we can see what Debian files will say about it. We'll find out. Okay. Zoom Linux app supports screen sharing on Wayland from OMG Linux. Version 5.11.0 of Zoom's official Linux desktop client integrates with the correct Pipewire portal to support screen sharing from Linux users using the app on a Wayland desktop session. When clicking the Share Screen button in the video conferencing service's Linux client, a small dialog appears. This asks you to select a particular app window or your entire screen to share through the app. Yes, you could do it before, but now it's Linux native. Keep in mind that Zoom is free but not open source software. Some features and capabilities may require a paid plan, though basic meetings which support screen sharing are available to free accounts.
I literally just switched to using Zoom in a browser 2 weeks ago because of this exact reason. And now it's supported. I will definitely try this in Sway, which does use that the screen sharing portal. Things are getting interesting. I know that I managed to get Firefox working with that screen sharing portal. So at that point, I can just, if I want to screen my share, I want to share my screen in anything that runs inside Firefox, so Zoom, Slack, Discord, anything, it will just work. But this is interesting. I mean, is there really a benefit of from using Zoom in the native client rather than in the browser? Because you can do everything in the browser.
I don't know.
I
I have been
I
using
very
the app when I need to use Zoom.
I very rarely have to use Zoom, but when I do, it's kind of a pain on
Yeah.
Wayland. Sometimes I just log into the Xlog session just to be able to share my screen. And another interesting news, Adobe Photoshop for sorry, Adobe Photoshop for web is free for all now. This is from Fuzzbytes. Last year, a web version of Photoshop was released to do basic editing. Adobe is now testing a free-to-use version of Photoshop of Photoshop for web. As a way of bringing more users to the app, the company plans to open the service to everyone, requiring only a free Adobe account to use it. According to a report from The Verge, Adobe is now testing the free version in Canada. If we go by how Adobe describes it, they call it freemium. However, it still won't have some of the features that are strictly limited to the paying customers. Adobe has assured people that it will have enough tools to perform basic Photoshop editing. Adobe's strategy to use the web version of Photoshop is quite simple. They want to hook the users and potentially make them paying customers in the future, is what the article says here. Although Adobe it still doesn't provide any timeline on when the freemium version would launch for more people. Sorry. Although Adobe still doesn't provide any timeline on when the freemium version would launch for more people. Meanwhile, the company is constantly making Photoshop for web better by adding tools like Refine Edge, Curves, the Dodge and Burn tools, and the ability to convert smart objects. So my impression is that this free version is mainly for just basic photo editing and not really doing making graphics and graphics works and such. But it's a start. I also found there was a similar web app similar to Photoshop that was mentioned on DN. I think it was called I don't remember its name. Oh well.
Okay, Joe.
NVIDIA lands AV1 VDPAU hardware acceleration in FFmpeg. This is also from Phoronix. NVIDIA has contributed support to the FFmpeg multimedia library for being able to take advantage of AV1 GPU accelerated video decoding by way of the VDPAU API, when using the latest generation NVIDIA RTX 30 Ampere GPUs. Since FFmpeg 4.4, there has been AV1 decode on NVIDIA GPUs via the NVDEC NVIDIA decode interface that is part of their video codec SDK. FFmpeg also supports Intel QSV accelerated decode. Windows DXVA2, D3, D11, VA, AV1 decode, and CPU-based decoding via the DAV1D project. AV1 encode is also supported with FFmpeg by way of Intel's SVT AV1. Now with FFmpeg Git AV1 VDPAU, decode is in place for those preferring VDPAU to the newer NVDEC. Outside of the NVIDIA space, this AV1 VDPAU exposure may help the Mesa Gallium 3D drivers that support the VDPAU video acceleration state tracker as more GPUs begin having AV1 decode hardware blocks. And that was a bit of a mouthful.
1 second, I'm really sorry, Joe.
Yes, it was,
I'm the
Joe.
culprit again. And I quickly looked up what AV1 is. It says Wikipedia says it's an open royalty-free video coding format initially designed for video transmission over the internet. So initially this design, so I assume it's used for more than that nowadays. I was just surprised that NVIDIA contributed to FFmpeg. Is FFmpeg only used on Linux, or is it basically used on all platforms?
I think it's used everywhere.
I know nothing. I noticed, with Joe reading that the last episode of Full Circle Weekly News that I read, I went and listened to. I go, gee, it sounds like I even know what I'm talking about, and I don't. Okay, well, that's the news. Let's move into security and privacy. In security and privacy, Hertzbleed is a new family of side channel attacks affecting Intel and AMD CPUs, making use of frequency side channels. From Phoronix, Hertzbleed is self-described as, quote, Hertzbleed takes advantage of our experiments showing that under certain circumstances, the dynamic frequency scaling of modern x86 processors depends on the data being processed. That this means that on modern processors, the same program can run at a different CPU frequency when computing. Hertzbleed is a real and practical threat to the security of cryptographic software. We have demonstrated how a clever attacker can use a novel chosen ciphertext attack against SIKE to perform full key extraction via remote timing, despite SIKE being implemented as constant time. First, Hertzbleed shows that on modern x86 CPUs, power side channel attacks can be turned into even remote timing attacks, lifting the need for any power measurement interface. The cause is that under certain circumstances, periodic CPU frequency adjustments depend on the current CPU power consumption, and these adjustments directly translate to execution time differences, as 1 Hertz equals 1 cycle per second. Second, Hertzbleed shows that even when implemented correctly as constant time, cryptographic code can still leak via remote timing analysis. The result is that current industry guidelines for how to write constant time code, such as Intel's one, are insufficient to guarantee constant time execution on modern processors. End quote.
So basically, if a malware can monitor the power usage of the CPU, it can guess the clock speed, or I'm not sure if I understand this correctly.
Sounds about right to me, but like I said, I don't understand these things.
So I assume it's the same thing with as with like with Spectre, as just extracting data from memory. Or maybe I'm wrong.
Well, whether you're right or wrong, let's move on.
The EU is asking big tech to go after deepfakes and fake accounts. This is from Fosbytes and also quoting Reuters. Deepfakes have become a common tool for spreading misinformation. However, the EU is determined to put a stop to them. The EU is planning to update its code of practice to regulate the spread of disinformation. European Commission may publish the update code of practice on disinformation in the following week. Once done, tech giants like Meta, Google, and others will have to comply with the code of practice or face fines. Reuters managed to get a copy of the proposed document that states, quote, relevant, relevant signatories will adopt, reinforce, and implement clear policies regarding impermissible manipulative behaviors and practices on their servers, based on the latest evidence of the conducts and techniques and procedures employed by malicious actors.
Well,
Well,
good luck with that.
that sounds like very technical, not technical, but uh, well, this quote sounds very low jargon, maybe.
Yeah. Well, Facebook has already admitted they don't know where their data is or where it goes.
The data goes into the data soup. That's simple.
Well, I
They did.
guess a lot of companies are turning into soup miners.
This seems like it's going to be an unenforceable policy.
Well, the thing about deepfakes is that if they get to the level where they are not detectable, then even if the companies wanted to comply with this, they would have a hard time. I just recently heard about how Amazon Echoes will have a feature where they can imitate someone's voice after listening to only a 1 minute recording of them, which is it's also deepfake but with voice. It's it might be even worse than the video deepfakes, because if you have a deepfake of someone speaking but it's not the correct voice, then it's not that convincing. But if you have a voice recording, even a fake voice recording, a deepfake one, without a video, people might be more susceptible to those. Not to mention like voice authentication services could be potentially be bypassed by these. Yep.
Okay.
Sometimes I forget that we're only at the beginning of the 21st century, and we think that we know what the 21st century is like, but we really don't. And these deepfakes might be one of the most significant problems of the century.
Well, that's our security and privacy for this episode.
Basically, there is no security and privacy.
So now we go into biweekly wanderings, and we always have enough of those.
Doesn't look like it this time.
Biweekly wanderings. Well, I've completed my journey to Calyx OS on my Pixel phone, and my wife has begun hers. She is dragging her feet, though. We've got 3 phones, and 2 of them are on Calyx OS, and one of them's still an Android. And she still keeps using her Android phone, even though she says she wants to use the Calyx OS phone. I have 2 new laptop installations, the new LXQT rolling version of Open Mandriva, and the latest KDE Neon, still based on 20.04. I posted video from my May concert at Atomicon in Charleston, South Carolina to my YouTube channel. Parts of it also seem to be on my Odyssey channel. But Odyssey and I have been fighting lately. It seems to be, well, I seem to be winning, but the fight continues. The sound is okay, but it would have been better had it not been for the fact that the convention's registration table was just outside the performance space with no door. So there's constant chatter on the side throughout. Even so, in the fact that I was not prepared for this concert, I didn't do too badly, and I hope the listeners concur. I was better before my accident and the loss of my teeth, but it's not bad for an old geezer. You can hear me fumbling with my teeth even as I talk now, because the bloody things just don't sit the way my mouth is used to working. I have applied to return to subbing at the local school district, substitute teacher. They're running subs through a third-party company, which handles a few other districts in the state, and it feels a little bit less personal, but I'll see what I can do. My orientation meeting is Thursday. If you hear me getting arrested, it's because I'll be actually teaching the kids something that they're supposed to learn that's illegal in this state. Norbert?
Give me 10 seconds. Sorry.
Okay, well, why don't we do my section next, and then we'll come back to Norbert.
All right.
All right. Well, I went to Florida for a week, and that kind of took up most of my time. I mean, even before I went to Florida, I still had to get ready to go to Florida and get the kids ready and to get the car ready and all the electronics ready. I missed out on several podcasts due to familial obligations and poor internet connections. So I basically missed 2 weeks worth of tilts, and I was barely on the Linux Lugcast, and I was barely on the Saturday show for this, and yeah, that was fun. Nothing unusual or overly interesting in the setup that I used there. I did work there for a week. More of the same that I normally do while traveling. I did start out using a physical KVM switch to go back and forth between my gaming laptop and my tablet. But I got tired of that quick and just started using Barrier again, which just, allows me to move my mouse over to the side of the screen and move it to the next one. My Dell Latitude 5290 is running Linux Mint. It was great for most daily tasks, but the battery life is still a bit disappointing. I would have to be back on a charger every 2 to 3 hours, depending on the task that I was doing. But considering that's like a laptop processor that's in it, that's probably still pretty good. And yeah, it was literally doing everything, and sometimes with the keyboard, sometimes without the keyboard. I was doing a lot of interacting with files on my server at home using either SSHFX or X2Go. Both were not as good as I have come to expect in the past, but some of that may have been due to how slow the internet connection was at my father's house on some occasions. I don't know if it was high traffic times or just spotty service, but it got pretty bad here and there. Also got a lot of use out of Plex and some of the things that Plex is offering for free, including access to Crackle, which is provided by Sony, and I've used it before. Sometimes there's good movies on there, sometimes there's good TV shows on there. The only thing I don't like about their TV shows is that they only offer partial runs at a time. They don't offer like every episode from every season all at once. I worked on a couple of laptops to get them running properly while I was out there. One of them was a bad hard drive, so that was an easy enough fix. I was able to get Mint to install on it, but it was a laptop that I had previously given to my stepmom. It was an interesting fix that I had done before, where I had pulled the hard drive from an older laptop and moved it to that newer one. It was a Windows machine, but I was using a small hard drive on it with a bootloader installed that pointed to the Windows partition because there was something wrong with the startup in the first place. I know there was some other reason that I had done that, but I don't exactly remember what it was because it's been a couple of years. All I ended up having to do was remove the faulty Windows hard drive and reinstall Mint on the other drive, and it works pretty well. Now I just need to actually find a use for it. Maybe Aperture, I don't know. The second laptop is an interesting problem. It runs, it turns on, and installed Mint easy enough, but it is overheating like a lot. I was monitoring temperatures and they were shooting up into the 96-degree range, which is just way too hot. And evidently at some time in the past it had released some of the magic smoke that's kept on the inside. So it looks like, according to my research and what I know, that there's a blown capacitor that is causing the overheating. this should make it possible for me to find the bad cap and get a bit of practice with working on motherboards in that way. So
Sorry,
hopefully I can do more of
I
that in the future.
I quickly ran away to refill my drink. I came back, and the first thing I heard without context was something about magic smoke, and I'm concerned. So what's this smoke about?
Um,
All of our computers run on smoke.
yeah,
The magic smoke stays inside the computer. If the magic smoke gets outside of the computer stops working.
right. But this one only let
Oh,
out this laptop, this 17-inch laptop. It's got an old like i5 450M in it. If that tells you roughly the age, but it only let out some of the magic smoke. It still turns on, it still works, it just overheats. So yeah, I just gotta.
okay. I haven't heard about this magic smoke before.
Oh, when you fry a
It's never-
component and it starts releasing the smoke,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the magic smoke that makes your stuff work. And when you release all of it, your stuff quits working. I was also able to get some soldering done while I was in Florida. Several of my headsets got fixed, and I was able to try out a couple of things with some of the really low-cost headsets that I've been wanting to work with. As in, I got one of them for $2.50 on clearance at Walmart. The mod was not that difficult, but I'm still getting an intermittent cutout on both sides, despite the fact that I know that the soldering is good and the cables are well mounted. It could be an impedance issue, but I don't think so. I'm going to have to keep looking into it. Maybe shorten the cables, check the other ends, make sure everything's seated solid. I also ordered a set of 6 low-cost headsets from eBay, and when they get here, I will be 3D designing a new casing for them, and we'll give them better batteries and some modularity. And because there's 6 of them, I'll probably figure out different ways of modularity and getting what I like there. But I don't know yet how much modularity, but I do have some ideas, and I have lots of batteries and connectors to play around with. So maybe I'll even make it so that I can slot a battery in there and pull it out and put the next one in if I need to. But that also means that I'll be building a charger for them, a separate charger for them as well. The hard part will be the 3D design and the prototyping. But once I have the interactive portions figured out in the design, that'll make things a whole lot easier. The buttons and the charging and how everything stays in place, then the rest of it should be relatively easy, and I should be able to switch quickly to the next one once I have the first one figured out. And that's really what I've been up to. Norbert, how about you?
I attended my cousin's wedding. I have 3 cousins. 2 of those are twins, and with this wedding now, both of them are married. And it was held in a very small church, but it was also a very nice looking church. And I realized that how much I prefer small churches compared to large churches. What's interesting is that I was raised in a uh, how is it in English? Reformant. So it's one of the Protestant.
There's lots of Protestant churches. You're going to
Yeah.
have to narrow it down a little bit.
Okay. No, what I mean is okay. So the Reformed Church and Protestant churches generally have plain white walls, and this was a Catholic church, and I rarely go to Catholic churches or Catholic masses. It's very different, and it was actually really nice. So I guess it somewhat changed my preconception about very what's the word I'm looking for? Very decorative churches. And the dinner after the ceremony, and at the dinner after the ceremony, I when we went to take our seats, I noticed that at the tables, the napkins on the plates had a very interesting arrangement. And if you open this link in the show notes, I think you can see why what the napkins arrangement reminded me of.
Very pointy.
Yep. More than that, Joe.
I'm bringing it
What
up
does
right
it
now.
remind?
There, it's on the
Sorry?
stream.
So what does it remind you of?
Nothing?
It was immediate. The Arch logo, obviously.
Ah, okay.
By the way, I sent it to a friend of mine who used to use Arch. He immediately got it. So yeah, maybe this means that my mind is thinking about Linux too much.
Maybe.
In the week after
You're turning into an arch villain.
your arch nemesis because, well, oh yeah. Speaking of Arch, I was using something, but it wasn't Arch. After in a few days after the wedding, I got sick, and for 2 or 3 days I had to stay in bed, and I took the opportunity to finish watching Mr. Robot. So I finished the last season. It was very interesting, and I recommend it to people even more. And now I'm rewatching Better Call Saul, which is a spin-off of Breaking Bad. The reason why I'm rewatching it is the final season is ending this summer, around the middle of August, and I watched the first couple of seasons so long ago I don't really remember what happened in those. So, but I remember that I really enjoyed it, and now I'm rewatching it and I'm enjoying it even more. It's interesting because you watch this, there's a lot of stuff about law in it because it's about a lawyer, and you get the sense, it's one of those shows that you watch and you get the sense that you understand law a bit more, which is interesting. It's sort of like what Breaking Bad did with chemistry. Hopefully, it made people watching it more interested in chemistry, but hopefully not in making drugs, but just chemistry in general, because chemistry can be interesting. I guess law can also be interesting. And props to anyone who's studying law or studied law in real life, because it seems very difficult. Because basically, the more time passes, the more you have to know. Because law is just like any other field; it builds on what came before, and there's a lot of stuff. Basically, people start with ancient Greek and Roman law and go from there. On the Linux side of things, gentlemen, I have some very great announcements. A few months ago, I said that what I'm really waiting for is the day when I will be able to run the Wayland window manager on my NVIDIA card with the proprietary NVIDIA drivers. And right now, I'm reading the show notes on my computer with NVIDIA, with the proprietary drivers, and I'm on Sway. And it's running surprisingly well. The only thing I haven't managed to figure out is switching up my mouse buttons because I'm using my mouse with my left hand. Uh, I found a couple of, so there has been a new NVIDIA release, the 515 drivers, and and after each NVIDIA release, there's some discussions about the state of support for Wayland, more specifically WR roots based window managers, which are a completely different Wayland implementation than GNOME or KDE. And most of the guides I found to make it work were for Arch. So I fired up Arch and I found a package called Sway-NVIDIA in the AUR, which is supposedly just to start a Sway session that is a bit more well configured for NVIDIA. One of the guides also suggested to use the Sway Git package instead of the Sway package, because apparently for some reason, if you build Sway on your system rather than just downloading a binary, it can perform better with NVIDIA. So I tried Sway Git and it actually started. The one thing that wasn't working properly was my cursor. And when I tried the Sway NVIDIA session, then my cursor worked fine too. So there are no graphical glitches as far as I've seen. I haven't tried writing anything that is graphically intensive like games, but I'm running Firefox and it's working fine. I haven't tried OBS yet because I haven't managed to get it to work. I know that Brody Robertson had a few videos about Sway and he was able to get OBS to work in Sway, which is through the XDG desktop portal WLR, which is a specific portal that is used for Wayland screen sharing. That I managed to get to work screen sharing from Sway to Firefox, but that was not on NVIDIA. So, and I haven't really managed to get it to work with OBS at all. I tried both the Arch package and the Flatpak, but no luck yet. I will. I hope to get that working soon. And so this was fairly easy to set up because I just had to download Swagit and Sway NVIDIA and things just work. And I already had a Sway config from my laptop, so I just copied that to the desktop and modified it to work with my desktop better. So it just works. And I did something that I didn't think I would do. I revisited Gentoo about a week ago, more than a week ago. That was my third attempt of installing it. The first time I just gave up because I realized I didn't really want to compile everything from source. The second time I tried it, I gave it like a 20 gigabyte root partition. When I wanted to install something, it was complaining about not having enough space because it said it needed like 10 gigabytes to pull source code, which I was surprised about. So now I made sure it has plenty of space. I installed Gentoo and I started tweaking, playing around with the use flags, with building software. And something terrible happened. I enjoyed it. And it's interesting. So my impression of Gentoo is that it gives you absolute control over your system, and not just in terms of like being a control freak, which I guess I kind of am when it comes to configuring an operating system. That's why I enjoy systems that are not working out of the box, and I enjoy getting them to work. But in Gentoo, one of the main things that you can do is fairly easily compile your own kernel because you can just install the source code that has the Gentoo patches in it. So you're not just pulling the source code for the kernel from kernel.org and go with that. You have the Gentoo specific kernel, but you can, if you want to, you can tweak a couple of switches in it. For example, I decided to see try and turn off all the support for AMD GPUs and CPUs because it's an all Intel laptop. And what I noticed is that the boot times with the custom kernel are noticeably faster than with the regular kernel. I mean, the regular kernel is already fast because it's Linux and it's a fairly lightweight system, but it's interesting. So I guess if you had a really, really old laptop or desktop that you wanted to get Linux working and you wanted to maximize performance, you could just take out everything that has to do with support for other hardware and just leave in what you need for that computer. For example, a lot of all distros have the Linux firmware package collection, which is a collection of firmware that you need to ensure that the distro will work on all systems. And I looked at how much that takes on the disk, and it was 800 megabytes, which is it's quite a lot. And then I started to take out all this firmware that has nothing to do with my hardware, and I managed to get the firmware directory to around 50 megabytes, which is less than 10% of the original size. So basically, it's Gentoo is absolutely a tinkerer's distro. It does have precompiled packages for the kernel and big packages like Firefox and LibreOffice, and but really the biggest thing is you can have. But I mentioned something that's called use flags. Basically, these are flags that you can set globally on the system or on the case or case by case for packages. So for example, if I want all the packages that have optional available Wayland support to compile with Wayland support, I can just set the global Wayland flag. And I wanted to do some mad sciencing again. I wanted to see if I could compile my system without any support for X11. So I added the flag -X. And there are some packages that complain about that, for example, Mesa. So you cannot compile a Linux system yet without X11 support, but I could manage to do that, add this -X flag to the global flag list, and those packages that were complaining about not being able to be built without it, I added exceptions for those. So this way, any package that can be built with Wayland support and without X11 support will only have Wayland support. And if something can only be built with X support, it will be uh, using X. And if I didn't include the X flag for Sway itself, the window manager, then the system would actually not have X Wayland at all. So you could, in fact, try to build a build a system that it's not even able to run X11 apps because I mean, and that's very interesting because most distros still use X11. And I've also found a website that is called Are We Wayland Yet? I think. And I found a Git repo called, I think, Wayland Awesome. And both of those are lists of resources uh, for various utilities and stuff to build a Wayland system. And mostly geared around the WL roots implementation of Wayland, which is what most Wayland window managers use. So I'm mainly still using Void on my laptop, and I actually spent more time inside Void cherooting into the Gentoo to build packages than booted into Gentoo itself. So basically, it's as if if Gentoo was a car, it's as if I was just spending all day in the garage and tweaking the car and not actually taking it for a ride. So it was sort of a project to see if it could work, and when it booted with my custom kernel, I was very happy with it.
Sounds like a lot of fun, Norbert.
Yep, I mean, fun. What is and what is not fun is absolutely subjective. If you ever want to have someone on Distro Hoppers to review Gen 2, I'm available, by the way.
Okay. Speaking of which, Tony Hughes just informed me that Distro Hoppers Digest episode 29 has become our first episode to hit 1,000 downloads on archive.org. Woo hoo.
Congratulations.
Regret. I forgot how to say congratulations in Italian. Well, congratulations. Rigratiazioni, I think. Well,
And
anyway,
that's it for our bi-weekly wanderings. Let's move into Linux innards. Linux innards. We're talking about licenses this time. To talk about licenses used in software, we must first distinguish between copyright and copyleft. As we will soon discover, most software licenses are a form of copyleft, GPL, etc. A copyright is a type of intellectual property that gives its owners the exclusive right to copy, distribute, adapt, display, and perform a creative work, usually for a limited time. The creative work may be in a literary, artistic, educational, or musical form. Copyright is intended to protect the original expression of an idea in the form of a creative work, but not the idea itself. A copyright is subject to limitations based on public interest considerations, such as the fair use doctrine in the United States. Copyrights can be granted by public law and are in that case considered territorial rights. This means that copyrights granted by the law of a certain state do not extend beyond the territory of that specific jurisdiction. Copyrights of this type vary by country. Many countries, and sometimes a large group of countries, have made agreements with other countries on procedures applicable when works cross national borders or national rights are inconsistent. Copyleft, on the other hand, is the practice of granting the right to freely distribute and modify intellectual property with the requirement that the same rights be preserved in derivative works created from that property. Copyleft in the form of licenses can be used to maintain copyright conditions for works ranging from computer software to documents, art, scientific discoveries, and even certain patents. Copyleft is an arrangement where software or artistic work may be used, modified, and distributed freely on condition that anything derived from it is bound by the same conditions. Copyleft software licenses are considered protective or reciprocal, in contrast with permissive free software licenses, and require that information necessary for reproducing and modifying the work must be made available to recipients of the software program or binaries. This information is most commonly in the form of source code files, which usually contain a copy of the license terms and acknowledge the authors of the code. Notable copyleft licenses include the GNU General Public License, GPL, originally written by Richard Stallman, which was the first software copyleft license to see extensive use, the Mozilla Public License, the Free Art License, and the Creative Commons Share-alike license condition, the last two of which being intended for other forms of intellectual and artistic work, such as documents and pictures. Public domain. The public domain consists of all the creative work to which no exclusive intellectual property rights apply. Those rights may have expired, been forfeited, expressly waived, or may be inapplicable. Such as the polio vaccine, Dr. Salk donated it to the general public and made no money off of that. License limitations. Licensees may distribute derivative works only under a license identical to, not more restrictive than, the license that governs the original work. Without share-alike, derivative works might be sublicensed with compatible but more restrictive license clauses. And we will cover that later. Joe?
Oh, is it my turn? Okay, I'm going to be covering
That's what it says.
the GNU, the GNU General Public License, the GPL. I was hoping to make the GPL somewhat understandable. It is out of my general purview of things that I know, which is one of the reasons I wanted it for a topic. Stop learning, start dying. That being said, evidently there is a reason I am not a copyright lawyer. This is some incomprehensible stuff right here, but I'm going to try anyway to give it to you as straightforward as I can. Also, remember, it's very truncated. I did get a lot of this from Wikipedia and some of this directly from the GNU GPL website. Let's start with some of the general and some of the history of the GPL. Like I said, most of it's from Wikipedia, but the GPL, or the General Public License, is a series of free software licenses designed to grant 4 freedoms in regards to software. These are to run, study, share, and modify the licensed software. And they have a bit of a mission statement. Nobody should be restricted by the software that they use. There are 4 freedoms that every user should have: the freedom to use the software for any purpose, the freedom to change the software to suit your needs, the freedom to share the software with your friends and neighbors, and the freedom to share the changes that you make. As Moss said, this was originally written by Richard Stallman for the GNU project. It is designed so that any derivative work created from the original software will have the same or equivalent license terms, although there are some exceptions. GPL 1.0 was designed to handle 2 main ways that software was restricted at the time, which was 1989. The first method of restriction was only releasing binary files, making software non-human readable. Specific requirements were placed in the GPL stating that source code must be available so that people could read it and use it for their own devices. The second method of restriction was to add restrictions later, either by attaching it to software on a less permissive license or by adding restrictions to the licensing later on. GPL v1 made it so that if any GPL software was used, then everything had to have the same permissiveness or more as the GPL. That is a summary and an attempt to make it easier to understand. There is a bit more to it there. GPL 2.0, this was where the liberty or death clause was added. It says that licenses may distribute a GPL covered work only if they can satisfy all of the licenses obligations, despite any other legal obligations they might have. This was added in order to prevent litigation in regards to reducing users' freedoms. Using something with a less permissive license could not sever the obligations of the GPL version 2. Now, GPL 3.0, this is where I started getting a headache trying to wrap my noggin around the legal jargon, which is saying a lot considering how version 2 is worded, and there are different versions of version 2. Now, according to Stallman, the most important changes were in relation to software patents, free software license compatibility, the definition of source code, and hardware restrictions on software modifications, such as using DRM to restrict hardware level access to the GPL license software, which is called TiVoization, based on what TiVo did to prevent people from modifying the GPL software that was on their hardware. Other changes related to internationalization, how license violations are handled, and how additional permissions could be granted by the copyright holder. The concept of software propagation as a term for the copying and duplication of software was explicitly defined. V3 improved compatibility with many other software licenses, with many stipulations that only worked with V2 if the or later clause was used with the V2 version. The important part for most of our listeners is that anything licensed with the GPL can be used internally or privately and modified as needed, so long as you have no intent to redistribute what you are using and no need to re-release the source code. If you do sell or distribute, you must include the entire source code so other people have the options of doing the same thing, using and modifying as needed. So the original source code essentially and any modifications that you have made need to be included. There's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo involved with the mixing of software, but it amounts to that it is possible to use more restrictively licensed software with GPL based software, so long as there is some kind of separation between the two. At least that was my understanding. I.e., the GPL software generates some data that is then stored and picked up by the more restrictive software to use, or vice versa. And this is an interpretation, and it could be wrong. Although there is much dispute on what implementations require licensing and what does not. I considered going out into the weeds here and trying to show how different types of linking could be used or not used, or how it's interpreted that way, but I think it would be less comprehensible to anyone that is not a programmer. Now, an extension, a continuation, a different variant is the GNU Lesser General Public License. It's a derivative of the above GPL v2 and is used as a bridge between GPL software and proprietary code. Essentially, only the portions of code or libraries that are covered by the LGPL are required to be available for modification, and if modified and distributed, the new changes also need to be available. And then there's the AGPL, the Affero GPL. Not much I want to say on this other than that it was created to cover the application service provider loophole in the GPL v3 that allows software as a service providers or anything that runs over a network to be exempt from the GPL license, since it is not distributed in the traditional sense. This puts the control back into the server owner's hands and makes it so that the things that they do are still available to other people. Without completely restricting it to themselves. And I guess that went a little faster than I thought it was going to, considering how much I wrote. But Norbert?
And it was way easier to understand than I expected, actually. And there are various other licenses. Obviously, in Linux, in the Linux space, GPL is the most known, I guess, or most heard about. But there are other similar licenses that are either non-permissive or permissive. And one of those is the BSD licenses. It's a family of permissive licenses imposing minimal restrictions on the use and distribution of software. And it only requires code to retain the BSD license, not if redistributed, and does not require source code to be distributed. There are two versions that Moss found, being the 2-clause BSD license and the 3-clause BSD license. And the first of these clauses is redistribution of code must retain the BSD license notice. Second one is redistribution in binary form must reproduce the BSD copyright notice. So not the code, just the license itself. And so this is the two-clause BSD license. The difference between this and the three-clause BSD license is the additional third clause, which says neither the name of the copyright holder nor the names of its contributors may be used to endorse or promote products derived from this software without specific prior written permission. So basically, if you take a software and redistribute it, that is the two-clause license, you can mention or you can include the name of the original project, but not with the three-clause license. There is also the MIT license, which originates from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. This is also a permissive license. So, what actually is a permissive license? It's when you don't have to redistribute the code. Or I know that the MIT license is something that when there's code or software that is licensed under this, then companies who develop proprietary software can take this and include it in their proprietary software. So I assume for the MIT license, the license can actually be changed if you use it, right? Someone help me, because this is something that I should have obviously checked but didn't.
Not quite certain. Let me see what the definition of permissive is.
I think we're in TLDR permission area here.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, I'll read this. In the meanwhile, I continue. So the MIT license has only very limited restriction on reuse, and so it has high license compatibility with other licenses. I assume, which is what I mentioned. So even proprietary licenses. Basically, it boils down to quote permission. It gives permission to any person obtaining a copy of this software the rights to use, copy, modify, merge, publish, distribute, sublicense, and/or sell copies of, and is only subject to the following conditions. The above copyright notice this permission notice shall be included in all copies of substantial portions of the software. So is sublicensing what I refer to as changing the license?
It changes the license for the other portions, for the portions not under the MIT
Yeah.
license.
Yeah. So basically, if you use something that is licensed under GPL, you use it in a project, then the entire new project has to be under GPL, right? But if you take something that is under MIT, then that portion has to be under MIT, but the rest of your project can be under any license you want, even proprietary, is what I'm getting from this.
It sounds like it, but we don't know.
Yeah. Joe, did you find anything?
Not really.
All right. So there's also the Apache license, Apache 2.0 license, which is very similar to the MIT license. It's also a permissive license. It grants, quote, perpetual, worldwide, non-exclusive, no-change, royalty-free, irrevocable copyright license to reproduce, prepare derivative works of, publicly display, publicly perform, sublicense, and distribute the work and such derivative works in source or object form.
Okay.
Uh,
A permissive software license, sometimes also called BSD-like or BSD-style license, is a free software license which, instead of copyleft protections, carries only minimum restrictions on how the software can be used, modified, and redistributed, usually including a warranty disclaimer. Examples include the GNU All Permissive License, MIT license, BSD licenses, Apple Public Source License, and Apache license. As of 2016, the most popular free software license is the permissive MIT license.
Yeah, so basically, large corporations like Microsoft and Apple and Amazon like the MIT license because they can use that code way more easily than something under the GPL. Okay, so there's also the Apache license, which is very similar to the MIT license. It's also a permissive license, but has restrictions about the use of the project's name. Quote, this license does not grant permission to use the trade names, trademarks, service marks, or product names of the licensor, except as required for reasonable and customary use in describing the origin of the work and reproducing the content of the notice file. So basically, it's similar to the three-clause BSD license. And there's also the Mozilla Public License 2.0, which is also free and open source weak copyleft license. What does weak copyleft mean? Well,
That means there's very little protections on it.
But I assume there's more protection than with the MIT or Aperture licenses. It says balance. It is trying to balance the concerns of both open source and proprietary developers. And it is distinguished from others as a middle ground between the permissive software BSD-like licenses and the general public license. So it's more restrictive than the Apache and MIT, but less restrictive as the GPL. It allows the integration flow of MPL licensed code into proprietary code bases, but only on condition those components remain accessible. Accessible
Weak
as in the code?
copyleft
Or...
has to do with inheritance.
okay.
Right.
We've
Other
also...
less commonly used licenses include Common Development and Distribution License 1.0, CDDL-1.0, Eclipse Public License 2.0, EPL-2.0, CSIL License 2.1, European Union Public License EUPL 1.2, Licence Libre du Québec, which has several versions, and the Mulan Permissive Software License V2, Mulan PSL-V 2.0. Did I cut you off, Norbert?
Oh, you just gave me less work. Don't worry about that.
Okay, sorry about that. And then we have the fun ones, the WTFPL. WTFPL is a permissive free software license compatible with the GNU GPL. As a public domain-like license, the WTFPL is essentially the same as dedication to the public domain. It allows redistribution and modification of the work under any terms. The title is an abbreviation for Do What the F You Want to Public License.
Sounds good.
And then we get to Creative Commons. CC0 is an unlicensed. Anyone is free to use whatever they like. License limitations are indicated by groups BY, SA, NC, and ND. These terms can be combined like CC BY-SA-NC, and there may be version numbers of each. For instance, CC BY-SA is currently at 4.0, and there are good reasons not to use 3.0 or earlier. There is a link in the show notes to a Fedora blog. The BY or by attribution, licensees may copy, distribute, display, perform, and make derivative works and remixes based on it only if they give the author or licensor the credits, attribution, in the manner specified by these. Since version 2.0, all Creative Commons licenses require attribution to the creator and include the by element. SA share alike. Licensees may distribute derivative works only under a license identical to, which means not more restrictive than, the license that governs the original work. See also copy left. Without share alike, derivative works might be sublicensed with compatible but more restrictive license clauses, such as CC BY to CC BY-NC. NC, non-commercial. Licensees may copy, distribute, display, perform the work, and make derivative works and remixes based on it, only for non-commercial purposes. And ND, no derivatives. Licensees may copy, distribute, display, and perform only verbatim copies of the work, not derivative works and remixes based on it. Since version 4.0, derivative works are allowed but must not be shared. All of my song lyrics are licensed under CC BY-SA 4.0.
Most podcasts are somewhere under the Creative Commons license. So
Yeah, I actually had to let Ronnie at Full Circle know about the difference between 3.0 and 4.0, and he has updated all of his licenses to CC BY-SA 4.0. You really should look at that Fedora blog item that we have in the show notes. There are some really good reasons to go with 4.0. We got anything else?
that was a really quick innards, and I think we did cover the topic
Yeah.
pretty well. So
It was like 5 pages long, and we got it done. Woohoo!
we might not even have to split this into 2 shows.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
All right, let's move on to vibrations. All right, vibrations from the ether. The saga continues. From John Wallace, dated June 18th. Hello, mintCast team. I have installed XFCE as a desktop client on my wife's laptop. In testing, I have found that the file manager is more responsive and faster under XFCE than it is under Cinnamon. However, Julie doesn't like the XFCE desktop. Is there anything that I could try to improve performance in the Cinnamon desktop before resorting to nuke and pave? If I were to take the nuke and pave route, I would first transfer Julie's LibreOffice documents to a USB hard drive and draw up a reinstallation and reconfiguration plan to follow. Thank you and kind regards, John.
Sounds like a job for me.
That's a tough one right there. Go for it. Go for it.
So there is a XFCE panel plugin called the Dock-like plugin, which the default XFCE panel has the kind of, I would say, so the default XFCE panel, you can so on by default on the XFCE panel, if you have the plugin that shows the open windows, you're not able to pin those there like you would be able to do on KDE or Cinnamon or even Windows. But there's the Dock-like plugin, which I'm not sure if it's in the repos of the distro you're using. You can just install it. It wasn't in the Fedora repo, so I had to compile it from source. And with that, you get a more modern feel for the XFCE panel, and you can pin applications. So I would say that is the biggest improvement you can make to just the general feel to the XFCE desktop.
Yeah, I don't think that'll solve his problem though, since this is specifically with the performance of the file manager. What I would start out doing is looking to see where the resources go in comparison between XFCE and Cinnamon. I don't think it's Cinnamon specifically because that's still a relatively lightweight desktop, but definitely be like running HTOP or something and then open the file manager in both and see what resources are being used.
I know that a few months ago I encountered a memory leak bug on XFCE that made the whole system very slow and sluggish.
Yeah.
And it had to do with the color profile daemon of all things. But other than that, XFCE, if it's working properly, it's supposed to be more performant than Cinnamon. So I'm not sure what the issue could be.
I would also suggest the idea of trying a different file manager and see how that runs. Yes. I know that PC FileMan works as well as other file managers.
PCMan.
Whatever it is, yeah.
PCMan FM, right?
Yeah, PCMan okay. FM.
Also a Nemo from Cinnamon.
Yeah, well, try different file managers, see if they run better.
But if it's the entire system that feels slow, maybe it's one of those issues that maybe it's the issue I mentioned.
Almost all the file managers are based on Nautilus, so you can pretty much swap them in. Okay.
All right. This next one is from Tim Harless. I have been a long-time listener to mintCast, but here recently I have heard some comments that have troubled me. You see, I use Linux and listen to Linux podcasts to escape the political crap of today's world. I have heard several comments from some hosts, mostly Moss, that would lead me to believe that they have leftist nutcase views. See what I did there? I made it political. I am a conservative and have been ever since I grew up. But I still listen to mintCast and enjoy it a lot. I'd enjoy it a lot better without political snide remarks that demean listeners like me and other conservatives. Plainly, I do not want to hear either side's views on a Linux podcast. It's really easy to keep political crap out of our Linux world. Opinions, especially political ones, are just like buttholes. Everybody's got one and a lot of them stink. So keep them to yourselves and produce what you guys are good at, an informative, interesting show that everyone can listen to. I look forward to listening to future episodes without political remarks and hope that you will take my suggestions into consideration. If not, it was good while it lasted. As I type this on Linux Mint Cinnamon 20.3, I'll tell you that I thoroughly enjoy LM and have so since I first found it and switched to it from Windows. Good day, kind sirs. Moss, do you want to read your response here? Because I really don't want to say my opinion.
I am sorry to have offended you, Tim. I will say that what is called conservative today is not what was called conservative when I was younger, so I suppose I seem leftist by today's US standards. But Linux is about freedom, and in my opinion, freedom, like Linux, is for everybody.
Yeah. You can't really be open source without it being at least somewhat political, sadly. But also, we try to limit our political opinions to the off-week Saturday shows if they sometimes leak into the main show. It's not on purpose, but honestly, we're not going to, stifle our opinions just because it's a Linux show. We're going to bring who we are to this show.
And we've got a couple comments from Discord. Rodzilla360, he says, been catching up on my podcast listening, and holy mintCast that, man. George was a great idea. I'm on Fedora 36, but thinking of giving Silverblue a go. I forget what he said about using GNOME extensions, to use or not to use RPM OS tree. Do you remember, Joe?
George was great to have on, and no, I don't remember what he said about that either. GNOME has never been my thing, so neither is GNOME extensions.
And from Londoner, for info, you may have noticed that the Update Manager Mint update has gone from 5.8.1 to 5.8.4 with 3 updates in the last 3 days. This is because of a bug where automatic update was enabled by 5.8.2 or 5.8.3. The latest version, 5.8.4, fixes the bug, and there is a link in the show notes to read the Linux Mint GitHub update on that. Okay, let's move into check this out. The June Full Circle magazine, all that and even Fedora. You should check that out. I'm obviously affiliated with Full Circle. It's about the only place in the world that my name follows Mark Shuttleworth's. That seems to be all we have. Anything else, Norbert?
I've got nothing this time.
Okay. So, housekeeping announcements. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@gmail.org. Join us live on YouTube. Post at the mintCast subreddit. Chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Our next episode will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, July 10th, 2022. And we have a link in the show notes to get that converted to your time zone. Our next live stream will be 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, July 2nd. And again, a link in the show notes to convert that. And live stream information is at mintcast.org/livestream. So where can we find you, Joe?
Well, you can catch me on a couple of my other podcasts. I haven't been on Tilts in 2 weeks, but I will be on this Wednesday's show. And that's tllts.org. I'm also on the Linux Lugcast, which you can find at linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email, jb@mintcast.org, or you can use my Ko-fi link and buy me a coffee. Boss?
Okay. You can find me at Full Circle Weekly News, Distro Hopper's Digest. Email is bardmoss@pm.me. And all my other information can be found at itsmoss.com. Bill wasn't able to be with us today, but you can find him. Email is wchauser3@gmail.com. He's Bill_H on Discord. He's at WCHauser3 on Twitter and WCHauser3 on Facebook. And also check out his podcast, 3 Fat Truckers, with a link in the show notes. Norbert?
You can send me an email at norbert@mintcast.org, and I made a Mastodon, but I forgot my username, so I will not say, but we'll cut it out. Okay, so just
We'll get that next episode.
Yeah. Okay.
And Nishant wasn't with us today, but you can reach him at nishant@mintcast.org, at Rycon Ghost on Instagram, at Rycon Ghost at GitHub, ghost.rycon on Discord, Maverick00783 at Steam.
He pronounces it recon.
He does? Okay. Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. A cast of thousands for our audio editing, including Norbert, Londoner, Tony Hughes, and others. We continue to need volunteers for our audio editing. Please contact us. Bill Hauser and Josh Lowe for their work on the website, and Bill Hauser for hosting the Linode, which runs our website. Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for our time syncs, archive.org for hosting our audio files, and the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co.
And it's a wrap.
It's a wrap. Does it have veggies in it?
Export audio. What show number is this?
Wow, under an hour and a half.
390.
390.
Yeah, hour and a half.
We are 20 weeks away from episode 400.
The shows are getting shorter again.
The cast is getting smaller.
Well, I have noticed that the 2 times that I have done the show have been 2 times they've been under an hour and a half. I mean, as main host. Apparently people don't like the show to keep going when I'm on it. Maybe I just move things too fast. I know I did step on Norbert's tongue at least once this episode.
It's okay.
My apologies for the cleat marks. Actually, I'm wearing my bare feet, so.
Your bare feet.
Yes.
But I have to say that I also kind of agree that political statements that have nothing to do with software or technology may be better left out of the show.
Well, like I said, we're not trying to put them into the show or anything like that. If a political statement slips out, it's not something we're going to try and actively not have on the show. But it's also not something that we're trying to actively put into the show either.
I know.
Okay.
You could also make the argument that
audio.
you could also make the argument that the debate about licenses and open software is also inherently political. Everything is political. But that is at least related to Linux in a way.
Well, like I said, we try to keep most of it to the Saturday show when we talk about guns and abortion and all that stuff. But if something...
war crimes, don't forget war crimes.
Yeah, and if something slips out on the regular show, then, well, sorry, it happened.
Slava Ukraini. Oops.
But it's all your fault, Moss.
I know. Especially Moss.
I'm not sure if just the statement that war is generally bad, I'm not sure whether that's more left or more right.
That's political.
Yes, is it political, but is it neutral? Is anything neutral?
Well,
say,
war means
obviously
weapons sales, and weapons sales means right wing.
Yeah, that obviously is a leftist statement right there if you don't like war.
Yeah.
Is it?
Mine went up already. What happened? 59.6 megabytes? There could be something wrong with my audio, people.
Maybe it's an MP3.
Oh, crap. Yes, it is. All right. I will go back. Remove.
I'm not very familiar with US politics, but when around the 2016 elections, I remember reading that at that time, basically the Democrats were the pro-war and Republicans were the no-war choice. And is it? Isn't it?
No, the Democrats were mostly anti-war.
Interesting.
Well, Hillary wasn't anti-war at the time. Hillary had a giant chip on her shoulder, and everybody was fairly certain she was going to send us into World War III because Hillary's Hillary. But yeah, pretty much the Democrats don't want that's even a difficult statement to say.
Well, the thing is, the Democrats are not the left-wing party. They are the not radical right-wing party.
And so
And
that's
means
why
that
they're
if
considered
left-wingers are going to have anybody that listens to them, they'll vote Democrat. It's not the best thing for a left-winger to do. There is not a left-wing party for them to vote for. And if they did, it would probably mean the right wing has larger votes than the Democrats or the left-wing party. And we are just not into multiple parties in this country. All right, let me go back and try this upload again. We need a left-wing party. We need it to be populist enough to draw in most of the center and not infuriate the rest of the center to make them vote for the right-wing party. In the past, we could stop the stream, Joe.
Can we?
We could.
We could, but I was enjoying the politics since,
Well, in the past, I have
for
been supportive
starting
of the Justice
topic.
Party. The Justice Party believes in economic, environmental,